Hello and welcome to today's web seminar, Thriving in a Whitewater World, brought to you by Guidon Performance Solutions. I'm Melissa Sopwith from Guidon, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. First of all, our speaker will be available immediately after the presentation for a live chat session in the networking lounge where you can ask questions. You can also enlarge the slide window at any time by clicking on the Enlarge Slide button located in the presentation window. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. And if you experience any problems with the program today, please press the F5 button on your keyboard, or you can close your window and relaunch the presentation by using the other media player. You can also visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the help button below the slide window. Leading today's discussion will be Ron Wince. Ron is a recognized innovator and thought leader in the areas of business performance improvement, cultural transformation, strategy deployment, and leadership development. He is the co-founder of Guidon Performance Solutions, and he has nearly 2 decades of experience working with healthcare, financial services, insurance, retail, public sector, and other non-manufacturing organizations. Ron has regularly appeared in prominent media outlets such as Forbes, Fortune, Patient Safety and Quality, Healthcare Executive, and he has also appeared as an expert commentator on the Fox Business Network. Ron, I will pass the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're just going to talk about a few things that we're finding out in the business world today as we see kind of what I'm calling a whitewater world, where we have a lot of complexity and uncertainty and those kind of things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a little bit about what are those things that we're seeing in the whitewater world, and then we're going to jump into 4 principles that we're finding are critical to be successful in the world of the future. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what I'm calling a Rosetta Stone, or a way that you can look at your organization, find those opportunities to build the capabilities you need in order to be successful going forward. And we'll talk about a concept we call cycles of use, and then summarize it with a few takeaways that you can take back with you to your organization. So the reality is that, as you've heard from some of the other speakers today, is that we really are in a whitewater world. And what that means is we have all types of things popping up in real time and impacting our ability to really look out past the next few months and identify what our opportunities might be. So for the most part, what we're seeing is that our visibility to the future is becoming more and more murky, and we're actually caught right in the middle of the current situation that we might be in. And so some of those things that we're seeing is a lot of complexity, a lot of things that are very hard to predict as far as the amount of change that might be coming. The world's become much more turbulent. We're seeing things that used to look like smooth sailing with intermittent storms become more like navigating whitewater, while also at the same time having constant storms and even some tsunamis kind of popping up at unpredictable times. One of the big things that's impacting the business world today is the amount of uncertainty. As you hear in the media, just about every day people are really caught up in the idea that we're not necessarily sure what's going to happen, whether it be from a regulatory environment or whether it's the recovery and whether it's going to be double dip, not double dip. What are the impact of global markets going to be? So that uncertainty is driving a lot of, in some cases, paralysis on the part of businesses. They're unwilling to take risks. And the other thing that we're seeing is those that are taking action are taking it in a very risk-averse manner. The world's becoming a lot less forgiving. We're starting to see where if you do make a mistake, sometimes it's hard to recover, and certainly it takes a little bit of time to recover even if you do. And the other thing that we're finding is that it's a real-time world, meaning that the ability for us to plan for everything that's going to happen is basically gone. So what we need to be able to do is react in a real-time fashion to where anything that pops up, we can, as an organization, respond to that without a lot of the time that we normally would have had in the past to react and correct course. So, of course, a lot of you might have seen this. This is the Chinese ideogram, which means uncertainty. In this particular case, it is, as you know, when you have that, you have both danger and opportunity. And the thing that we want to be able to recognize is that we can go both ways with this. We can either have opportunity where we can be successful, or we can get caught up in the danger of it and paralyze our organizations not to take action and take advantage of the future. So one of the things that we want to talk about is how do we take advantage of the opportunity while protecting against the downside of the danger. So 4 principles that we'll talk about. We're going to talk about each of these a little bit, but the first one is that purpose and core values are the only constants. They're the only things that basically remain the same. They also are the things that are most difficult to change within an organization, and we'll talk some about that. The second thing is the speed at which the world is moving requires that we begin to compete in what we call dog years. How matters more than what, meaning the way that we go about doing our business is more important than what we decide we're going to do today. And the last thing is that people are the linchpin to success in the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these as we move forward. So the first one we'll talk about is purpose and core values. Purpose and core values a lot of times are minimized from a standpoint of how it guides the organization. I think there are lots of CEOs that I have talked to in the past that it took them several years in their career before they finally realized how critical the values and the purpose of the organization are to success, whether it be doing a turnaround, whether it's dealing with a merger and acquisition world where they're buying companies or integrating other companies, or whether it be challenges that they're facing in just the day-to-day business and how they react to those, all the way from how they launch a new product or service to how they might reorganize the organization. And those purpose and core values, if they are not taken seriously, sometimes become the filter or the screen for how the organization view those. And that view can determine whether we have success or whether we have failure. Often what we see is that the antibodies kind of come out of the organizations as these changes from outside the world begin to impact us. So when we start putting that in the context of our whitewater world, what we find is that the ability for an organization to adapt often is impacted by the purpose and the core values of that organization. Often what people will do, depending on the culture, and this is what people often refer to as the culture, the purpose and core values, often what we'll see is that people will react negatively to the amount of change that's happening outside, or they'll react defensively, or they will, in some cases, just choose to ignore it and put their head in the sand and hope that the world will pass them by and everything will be okay on the other side. So the ability to understand and leverage the purpose and core values for the future are critical to the success of the organizations. Oftentimes what we forget is that these are the compass points that the organization will follow, and we need to take advantage of those. And if we don't take those into context, a lot of times it might present a bigger danger than the outside world itself. So just a couple of bullet points that show the purpose and core values and the functions of those. Obviously, one of the things that we find is that in the better organizations, the purpose and the values, and particularly the purpose part of it, will provide a pretty good context for frontline leaders and middle managers to make decisions based on that purpose at the real time, at the point of impact. When they're dealing with a customer or they're dealing with a particular business situation, the ability to make decisions is impacted by the way that they view the purpose of the organization and certainly the values of that organization. When you put it in the context of, the military, where we have frontline leaders out in the battlefield, the ability for them to take into account the intent of the purpose of that organization drives their decision making, so that they always know where they fit in the context of the larger battle plan. The same is true for every type of organization. So the ability for that frontline leader or that person at the point of impact to understand what the implications of their actions are with regard to the direction setting and the intent of the organization is going to drive whether they make good decisions or whether they make bad decisions. And bad decisions don't necessarily mean defective. What we mean by that is decisions that aren't necessarily aligned with where the organization is trying to go. Sometimes people look at this as also the moral compass of the organization when you start talking about values. So what it is that we value as an organization, and those aren't clearly articulated. It's not normally the things that we see on the poster on the wall. It might be just plain and simply the unwritten rules that are within the organization. For example, showing up on time for meetings. It might be that everybody shows up on time for meetings. That's not necessarily something that we see written on a poster. It might fall underneath a context, but that is certainly a way that if you're a new person in the organization and you have a habit of being late, but the organization values timeliness in an unwritten fashion, then what happens is people react negatively to you as that new leader or that new member of the organization. So these are some of the things that we take into account when we start looking at purpose and core values, and the ability to leverage those to guide the organization both in decision making and the way that we behave and the